Greetings, this is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. On tonight's Global View Weekly Contributor Brian E. Muhammad, Final Call News staff writer, pays tribute to the life and legacy of Dr. Runoko Rashidi, world-renowned scholar, anthropologist, and historian. Later in the show, Brian E. Muhammad will discuss Israel's continued stoking of war with Iran and its implications as a possible warm-up to a multi-country war. Lastly, Brian E. Muhammad will discuss the UN General Assembly's creation of a Forum for Accountability of American Racism. Before we get into the top news, let's do a recap of the current events we've recently covered. On yesterday's show, weekly medical contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad updated us on how states and communities are tracking COVID and its Delta variant infection rates, how the vaccinated have responded, and the effect on the population in general. What's the reason the scientific community is saying a vaccinated person can transmit the COVID infection?
Well, as you know, there's this one side or the opposite in just about every aspect when we're dealing with health these days. And there are many scientists that are saying that when we are vaccinated and the body starts to produce these spike proteins on the cells, this is happening in just about all the tissues in the body. And so the immune system is having to respond to that reality, meaning that there's work that has to be done in order for the spiked proteins to be produced on so many cells. We're talking about billions or trillions of cells. And so at the same time this activity is going on, here we have the Delta variant coming into this region. So I'm specifically speaking about the United States. And now your body has to fight another variant.
Sister Sherry Muhammad, founder and director of Asiatic Minds Online School, and Sister Iman Ali, meditation instructor, discussed the importance of meditation and why Asiatic Minds School offers meditation classes. Will Asiatic Minds curriculum offer students the right mix of classes to help them master subjects and improve their overall level of performance and achievement in schools?
Thank you for the question. At Asiatic Minds, what we are striving to do is give more classes and offer more classes other than your basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, as we sometimes call it. So we want to offer classes that are going to help the students enrichment as a whole person. And so we have several classes outside of our math and our traditional classes that will help our students mentally and spiritually. We'll be getting into physically and in other different aspects that will help them to be able to go back to those original foundational classes and have a better mind to master them.
Brother Born King of Soul Society discussed the organization's youth mentoring and empowerment programs that are helping people tap into the gifts of their soul and lock in their personal life experience. Now, how did Soul Society get started?
So, in a nutshell, when you, the long story short, it's like a trilogy movie and everything. So I just give y'all a trailer, But long story short, a major transition in my life. Well, one of the first things was my junior year in high school. We used to have these hotel parties, and long story short, I was arrested for the first time my junior year. Mind you, was with some weed that I didn't even know was in the environment I was in, but the way that process was carried out and that experience was carried out in the way the cops expressed the intent, to really take down, young black men. And I mean, they were literally expressing themselves in a way like, dang, this isn't even enough to really do what we would like to do with them.
NNV News anchor Christina Muhammad's guest commentators were artist and energy healer Sister Malika Phoenix Ali Muhammad and wellness facilitator Sister Teresa Muhammad, a traditional birth worker and birth keeper. They discussed the controversy over comments made by hip-hop artist DaBaby.
All right, so last week we witnessed cancel culture right at its finest. Do you all think that these cancellations from these festivals and events were necessary? Sister Malika, can you start us off?
I don't think it was necessary at all. I think last week the controversy with DaBaby is a prime example of how cancel culture has gotten totally out of control. And I think we need to be very, very careful about how we think about these types of things, because it's proof of a further pulling back of our rights of freedom of speech. And although it's very, very popular nowadays to speak out against people with particular sexual preferences and things of that nature, I think it's extremely important that we be very careful about heralding and cheering on this type of cancel culture.
Sister Malika Muhammad and Sister Teresa Muhammad voiced their opinions about Johnson & Johnson targeting Black women with their talcum baby powder product.
So tell me, what are your thoughts? Why are so many dangerous products being placed specifically in our communities that they know are toxic and dangerous to our health?
Well, I think that number one, the fact that we are always the target for the worst products is one aspect. But the other part is that we're the trendsetters. Anything that comes into the Black community, period, women tend to be the mass consumers in the Black community. Single mothers dominate, in our homes. So, but we also the trendsetters. So when you put something in front of us, if we like it for any reason and we market it and we start wearing it, everybody wants to wear it. And it doesn't matter the color that you are. Everyone follows what we do. And that's just the way that it's been, and that's the way that it is.
Sister Malika Muhammad and Sister Teresa Muhammad also shared their thoughts about the family of Henrietta Lacks filing a lawsuit against Big Pharma.
Is it possible that other Blacks, in addition to Henrietta Lacks, have cells now commonly known as immortal gene lines that have an amazing property?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. As we know from the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that the Black man is the original man. So our cells are these immortal cells. That is who we are. So absolutely, I have no doubt. You hear these sorts of things all the time, not only Henrietta Lacks, but you hear about aborted fetal cells being utilized in the cosmetics industry and all this. And this is the reason why, and we all know the data or the statistics about, unfortunately, this issue of abortion in our communities, but a majority of those aborted fetal cells are African American or Black women who are releasing their children.
On this week's I Have a Testimony, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad's guest was student minister Reverend Muhammad of Monroe, Louisiana, who discussed his work as student minister and how he joined the Nation of Islam.
Brother Vervin, you've talked about the history of the Nation of Islam in Monroe, Louisiana. Now, can you share with us, with our audience, how you became introduced to the teachings and eventually joined?
Yes, sir, Brother Will. Before I say that, I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention, the actual bow tie was produced out of the lynching that Brother Minister Biard went through.
Wow.
Uncle Elijah Muhammad said that from now on we are going to begin to wear the bow tie, especially the ones that with the clip. So that was birthed out of that situation, that ordeal.
Wow.
But Brother Minister, I was introduced to the teachings while a student at Southern University. My roommate at the time, when I was a freshman, would always play the minister. He wasn't a Muslim or a registered Muslim, so to speak, but he always played the music. At the time, it was cassette tapes. And I would always ask him, who is that man?
Last week, I spoke with Final Call news staff writer and weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad about Israel's inordinate influence on the world stage, their interference in the affairs of other governments, and their political pressure campaigns. In May, the African Union condemned Israeli attacks on Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and Al-Aqsa Mosque and the evictions that took place in Sheikh Jarrah. Why has the AU now granted Israel observer status?
Well, you know, they've been lobbying, Israel have been lobbying to get status at the AU for a number of years. And they have been rejected because of strong pushback from leaders such as South African President Ramaphosa, and others who rejected their presence based on the principled position in support of the Palestinian cause that Israel, obviously has not moved to rectify in now 73 years.
As Israel accused Iran of a recent bombing, questions remain regarding Israeli involvement in numerous assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists and officials. A number of Iranian nuclear scientists have been assassinated. We've been talking about the bombings of the Palestinians for the last couple of weeks. Has Israel been implicated in those assassinations?
Yes, Sister Rosalind, they've been blamed and they took credit. The former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on a few occasions have alluded to what they did. Just a couple of months ago, the former head of the intelligence apparatus, the notorious intelligence apparatus of Israel, Mossad, said in an interview that they did this, that they were the culprits behind this.
As Israeli President Isaac Herzog called a boycott of Israel a new kind of terrorism designed to hurt Israel's economy, Ben & Jerry's ice cream company has said its boycott is following their social mission. Are the owners of Ben & Jerry ice cream Jewish?
Of Ben & Jerry's are Jewish. Ben Cohen and Jerry, forget his last name, but Green, I won't mess up his name, but yeah, they're Jewish. The founders are, but the company is now owned by Unilever, which is a $61 billion a year food conglomerate based in England. And, and I also want to say on that, continuing on that last point that we was talking about, that to show you the hypocrisy, all the way around, I'm talking about America, Israel, Ben & Jerry's, Unilever CEO made it very clear that his commitment is to continue to do business in the state of Israel.
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. Then Global View weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad will be back on to commemorate the life of Dr. Runoko Rashidi. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds. Online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small but significant steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
Dr. Runoko Rashidi was a renowned anthropologist and historian whose distinguished scholarship and monumental works will continue to enhance our understanding of the global Black African presence. Joining us to discuss his contributions is Global View contributor and Final Call News staff writer, Brian E. Muhammad. Greetings, sir.
Greetings, Sister Rosalind.
Yes, sir. Now, what would you say stood out to you most about Dr. Rashidi and his work?
Oh, man, Dr. Rashidi is, his example, I would say, is the greatest legacy, because we live in an age, especially with today's technology, where you can get information at the flick of a finger. And, and there's a saying that, it must be true. I saw it on the internet, but as free as the internet is, there's also a lot of falsehood, a lot of information that is not really true and reliable. And his example was the kind of man who went and he searched out the truth based on verifiable evidence, going to the different places of the earth and pulling the information up of our history. And so when we say that talk about the great legacy of we as a people, well before slavery, because our history didn't start in slavery, Dr. Rashidi was of that ilk of scholars who went and proved this and, and pulled up the evidence for us. I think that is his greatest legacy.
Yes, sir. What do you believe his greatest legacy left us? Do you think that it's something that a few of us can kind of pick up the torch and carry on?
Well, I think so, and I think that there are great scholars in this present generation. We could talk about our own scholar and brother Dr. Wesley Muhammad and people like that who spends the time to put in the work, because that is the difference between a Dr. Rashidi and the average one of us who may sit and listen to him or read a book of his. He went and he does the legwork, and yes, it can be done and should be done.
And Dr. Rashidi worked with and under some of the most distinguished scholars of the past half century. He was a giant in his own right, but he often said he stood on the shoulders of giants. Who were some of these giants that he spoke about?
Well, I know that he worked and had relationships in the line of this work from men as vast and great as Dr. Ivan van Sertima, you know, the great scholar who gave us They Came Before Columbus, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, who goes without saying, you know, we can spend 2 or 3 shows just talking about his work and legacy, you know.
Right.
Asa Hilliard, which is very interesting because Dr. Hilliard also, like Dr. Rashidi, passed away in Egypt while on a trip in Egypt. And of course, Egypt was one of the main places that scholars like that spent a lot of time going because there's so much evidence of our history still intact. And then I have to say, I can't even name those without naming Dr. Yosef Ben Yakimin. You know, these are the greats that he worked with.
Okay. He was also a chronicler of the global African presence. Where did his work take him? You mentioned Egypt. Where else had he gone?
Let me see. Well, Egypt, you know, is part of Africa, you know. So, of course, throughout the continent of Africa, he went to India, you know, he went and he did a major conference in India, which is very interesting for a Black man from America to do major scholar conferences in places like India, you know, Central and South America. I mean, these are just a few, you know, of the regions that he went to in his work.
You know, another doctor who a lot of us know the name of, Dr. Anthony Browder, who is the director of the ASA Restoration Project, funding the excavation and restoration of the 25th Dynasty tomb, said that Dr. Rashidi gave incredible answers to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's incredible question, which was, who is the original man? Was Dr. Rashidi also proving that Blacks are the originators?
Yes. In fact, you know, this is going back to his legacy. This is, you know, we can say that the Black man that is the original man, that we are the original people. But again, it took historians like, you know, Dr. Rashidi and others to go after and uncover the evidence of that. You know, not just, you know, not talking in theory about it. And of course, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't talk in theory about anything he taught. He had the proof. But these men, like Dr. Rashidi, actually went and studied, again, the verifiable truth that we are the original people of the earth.
You mentioned Dr. Wesley a moment ago as well. Was Dr. Wesley Muhammad influenced by Dr. Rashidi?
Yeah, you know, this week's Final Call newspaper has a wonderful article by our brother out of Philadelphia, Brother Jerome Muhammad, who writes the column Africa Watch. And he did a piece just on Dr. Rashidi, and he interviewed Dr. Wesley Muhammad. And yes, Dr. Wesley did talk about the influence that Dr. Rashidi had on him, you know, his work, and of course his generation of scholars.
How would you say, or would you say, that their work complements each other?
Well, I think that the main thing was the dedication to truth, and the dedication again to verifiable sources, verifiable facts. And Dr. Wesley, I would say that Dr. Rashidi was a forerunner of the kind of scholar that we see in Dr. Wesley Muhammad, because Dr. Wesley had to do his work against the grain of academia. Academia, where academia wants to control not just the narrative, but how you present the narrative to the world.
That's true.
And Dr. Rashidi was a forerunner to go against the grain of that, to do what he had to do to get the truth out.
And Brother Brian, Dr. Rashidi has impacted us greatly. How has he impacted the Black African-centered scholarship?
He freed it. As Dr. Wesley said to Brother Jerome in that article that I referenced, he liberated them, because again, this Black scholarship coming out of academia, coming out of the schools and universities of the world, are oftentimes stifled by these universities or what they call academia, because academia, as we know it, is based in white supremacy. And white supremacy is not going to freely allow any Black scholars who is speaking of the greatness of our history, because the greatness of our history is also still in our DNA. And so their own sense of white supremacy stifles Black academia, or Black scholars rather, and so Dr. Rashidi freed them, and he made it wholesome for them to do their work again against the grain of white supremacy and academia, which really needs to be destroyed, be honest with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother Brian. Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors coming up. Brother Brian will speak on the growing conflict between Iran and Israel, and if it could grow into an all-out war. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
As Israel continues to stoke the flames of war in Iran, it could draw in other nations, America, China, Russia, and the European Union, into an even greater war in the Middle East.
The White House worried about the threat and counter-threat between Israel and Iran, and the high rhetoric with the threat of the Israelis launching a military strike against Iran.
Well, of course, Israel as a sovereign country has the right to defend itself, and we certainly recognize that first and foremost. We, of course, are working with the international community and have concerns about the escalating activity we've seen as it relates to the seized tanker, the Asphalt Princess, also the Mercer Street attack. And these are all certainly issues that are of concern to us and of concern to the international community. We feel it follows a pattern of attacks and other belligerent behavior, and these actions also threaten freedom of navigation through crucial waterways, something that is posing a risk to a range of countries around the world.
Back with us is Brother Brian Muhammad. Brother Brian, why is Israel continuing to stoke the war with Iran?
Well, Israel needs to stay relevant. Israel has a problem. Israel cannot exist without the backing and the full support of the United States. So Israel is trying to stay relevant where it does not lose its so-called benefit, which is to a tune of nearly $4 billion a year, plus loans and military loans and assistance that pushes that figure nearly $5 billion a year of taxpayer money. So Israel as a welfare state has to stay relevant to America. And so the United States have always been interested in that region because of the great oil wealth. It's been it's been pumping oil since the 1930s in Saudi Arabia and other parts. And so Israel, when they planted Israel there, the United States and Britain in particular, planted Israel, or I should say European Zionists, into that land, they became in-house, I'm talking about the house of the region, an in-house enemy to the rest of the region of people doing the bidding of America. And it seems as though the question can also come up that if Israel is just a small country, and it seems like it wields so much power even within the United States, is it a case of the dog wagging the master? Because the United States can put an end to Israel's role as a trouble source in that region just by pulling that $5 billion a year and reining Israel in. But the question comes, well, why does Israel have, why do the Zionist element have so much sway over the United States? Which probably is a whole nother show to talk about that.
Right.
But they have reasons. And of course, again, one of the other reasons why the United States needs Israel and the trouble that it causes in that region and the upset in that region is the military industrial complex. Because the Middle East gets nearly half of all sales of arms are purchased by the Middle East. Saudi Arabia gets most of that within that number. So there's money reasons, business reasons why this is taking place, but it has far-reaching problems that may cause the power of America at the end of the day, which we'll talk about some.
Okay. Now, have the crippling sanctions on Iran, assassinations of top Iranian generals, airstrikes, and even the military confrontation accelerated U.S., Israel, and Iran onto the path of war?
It does. Iran is uncompromising. Iran is not afraid of America. Iran is not afraid of Israel. And so when you look at this, this banter that have always been going on, Israel uses Iran as the boogeyman, as the pretext to continue this upset in the Middle East. There was a time that all of the Arab nations said to Israel, we will not recognize you because of your troublemaking. And they had trouble with America, but America was really too big for them to step to. And so it has the potential to cause war which we're hoping that it would not cause. You know, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan has always has on many occasions warned the United States from being pushed into a war with Iran and others at the instigation of Israel. But it seemed like they keep having this kind of headlong push for that the more time goes on.
Right. Now, last year, an Iranian top official spoke before the UN General Assembly, advising them of America's long history of aggression, genocide of indigenous people, and military actions, as well as warmongering all around the world. Why has the UN failed to hold America and Israel accountable?
Well, because the UN is a toothless tiger. The UN, think about a group that's supposed to be quote unquote democratic. 196, I think, nations belong to the United Nations. Okay. That 196 is ran by 5 that sits on the Security Council. That 5 is, all but weak to the one, the United States. The United States has veto power. So anything that the 196 puts together and say, this is what we want to do. Mm-hmm. If it's against the will of America's policy, then they will veto it. They block it. So it's a kangaroo kind of situation. It's clownish. And so Israel has the diplomatic covering of the United States. So anything that comes up against Israel, because all of the nations of the earth recognize, or most of them recognize, that Israel has been an apartheid state to the Palestinians, that Israel has broken resolution after resolution put forth by the United Nations. Mm-hmm. And the United States backs everybody up off of Israel with its veto power. So that's why the UN sits around and they'll talk a good game when stuff come up. They'll condemn this and condemn that, but they won't do anything because they can't do anything with this present setup.
Do you think that Israel wants conflict to continue so that it can present itself as the great ally of the United States against adversaries like Iran and others?
Yeah, because that it goes back to what I said a few minutes ago about the fact that Israel needs to stay relevant. The greatest fear, as somebody told me, I think it was Medea Benjamin of the pro-peace group called Code Pink, who I interviewed for this article that we're talking about now. And she said, well, Israel is deathly afraid to lose the support of the United States. And everybody is saying Israel cannot stand on its own. It is literally the welfare check that the taxpayer dollars send to Israel without fail or question every year that upholds that reality. She gets from other nations, but she gets the #1 check, the biggest check of foreign aid from the United States. She gets the largest of any nation on the earth.
Now, Brother Brian, can you tell me, was America forced out of Afghanistan?
They would like to say no.
Okay.
But history shows that nobody has ever won military victory in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, they've been ran out of Afghanistan. After 20 years of war, it was the longest running war for the United States. and they have not made any inroads at all. They were put out. They couldn't sustain it in blood or treasure. See? But America has a dilemma, because what brought America there, they say, was terrorism, the fight of terrorism. We're going to go after Al-Qaeda. We were going to go after bin Laden. We're going to go after this one and that one for the sake of ending terrorism. But they know damn well that they were not there for bin Laden or terrorism. They were there because of, again, the oil pipelines into the Black Sea and access to that. So, but they still have their eyes on the prize. So America left there just a few weeks ago, are in the process of fully leaving there. But look at what's going on now. They say the Taliban is now back and they're taking over territories and they're winning territories. And now America got to come back in, which they're now in the process of going back in. You just left a couple of weeks ago. But they were ran out of there, just like in Iraq. They were ran out of Iraq. The government of Iraq voted on numerous occasions to put the U.S. military out of the country. And so they can't say that they're leaving because it's time to leave and we accomplished what we went there to accomplish. You're a liar. You lost and you run and you're leaving with the tail, beneath, in between your legs. That's what's going on with Iraq and particularly with Afghanistan. Nobody has ever won a war in Afghanistan. Nobody. We could check the history.
Right. Could America? Nobody.
Nobody.
Could America? What are your thoughts on this? Could America be dragged into a war at the end at the instigation of Israel?
Yes. Okay. See, if you do not rein in the inordinate influence that the Zionist element, the lobbies here in the United States have on Washington, it's not by accident that the Zionist, the state of Israel, has bipartisan support. Democrats are not going to go against them. Republicans are not going to go against them. And they start them early. Maybe one day somebody will become a senator. Somebody may even become president. But when they started off as a little assemblyman in their district somewhere, just starting in politics, Israel always finances a trip to Israel for them. And this is where they rein in the future lawmakers of America. So can it happen? It can happen. But here's the problem. We're living in a day now where the judgment of God is on America. And that's why the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has been warning about these wars. See, if you go to war with Iran, right now, Iran is allied with China, with Russia, and the European Union is in there. Because when America walked away just a couple of years ago from this nuclear deal that kind of brought Iran back into the diplomatic mix, and then Trump walked away from it, the other nations of the earth, they didn't walk away. But the way that the United States did it, they couldn't just continue to do business in the normal way that they wanted to do business, or was opening up for them as a result of this nuclear agreement. Now, America's been having trouble.
Brother Brian, I'm going to stop you there. We have got to take a break for our sponsors. But when we return, I'm going to let you finish that point, and then we'll be discussing the UN establishing a panel to investigate systemic racism in America. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline reads, "Separate and Be Saved. America's race problems and deadly race interactions are growing worse. It is time we leave the children of our former slave masters and 400-year-old tormentors. Separation from whites is the only and best solution to this problem, a serious problem that is rooted in prophecy." This FCN volume number 41 edition middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is entitled "A Case for Separation." To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call cover report.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
Thank you for joining us. Prior to the break, we were speaking with Brother Brian E. Muhammad about whether or not America could be drawn into war by Israel. And Brother Brian, I want to give you some time to finish your point. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, it's dangerous if America allows itself to get dragged into a war in Iran because of the other world powers that are there. It has the potential to jump off what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has taught us, what the Honorable Louis Farrakhan continues to warn about, which is this war to end all wars called the War of Armageddon, which will bring all the nations of the earth into battle. And when that happens, unfortunately for America, they will send their soldiers in by the thousands, but they will come back by the tens. And the Honorable Minister Farrakhan said that they will never be a power again as we know it. It will not, their power will be lost. And right now we're looking at the manifestation of loss with America. That's why you see them leaving Afghanistan in such a way that they're leaving. They're leaving Iraq. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said they will be put out of the Far East and they are coming out of the Middle East. And we are witnessing that. Nobody will think that the greatest power, military power, and the number one economy on the earth will be in this position. But they are in this position and they have lost friendship, allies, and those who feign that are just faking it with America.
Now, but Brother Brian, I want to
so they're alone.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm saying so America right now is alone. And you know, so to get dragged into this type of war at this time, it will be running right into the strategy of Allah to bring America down. It's Allah doing it.
I want to allow you some time to discuss the UN Permanent Forum that was just created. So the UN Permanent Forum of People of African Descent panel has developed a 5-member panel in line with the UN Human Rights Council establishment of a panel of experts to investigate systemic racism in American policing. Currently, there's a Final Call News article entitled World General Assembly Creates a New Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. How will this new platform improve the lives of Black people around the globe?
Well, the UN, as I've been saying earlier, it's a joke. The UN does not have the power. Let me just start off with this. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that justice is not going to come from the courts of this world. It's going to come from the God of justice. The UN is enslaved to the biggest influencer of oppression in the world, which is the United States. So they can put these panels together and it sounds good, but they don't have the teeth, nor is there the political will to really use this as a mechanism to really put America in check. Look at the language. And I'm glad that you raised the question, Sister Rosalind, in that language. What will it do for Black people around the globe? But when you read the article, the panel was formed as a result of the systemic racism within the United States. And when the Human Rights Council raised this issue, particularly after the death and the killing of George Floyd last year, the United States fought tooth and nail because they wanted to put a panel together, a UN-backed panel together to look at the systemic racism, the history of it, and the current practices of it in the United States. The United States said no. And the Human Rights Commission capitulated, straight up punked out. And they said that, okay, well, we won't put a UN panel together. They just instructed the director of the Human Rights Commission to do a study and to present a report by, it was either June, July, or this month.
Okay.
All right. Now now this is very important to know, to put in perspective. When they told her to do this report, the United States pushed the language to change. That, well, you can't say that racism in America as a problem in the United States, because it's a world problem. Everybody has a problem. It's just like the old technology language, all Black lives matter. No, all lives matter. That's technology. To dilute the fact that Black people are suffering like hell. So make it all people matter. So the United States said, okay, if you're going to do it, and this is what the UN Human Rights Commission did. They said, don't look at just the United States, but look at it from a global standpoint. Thus the language, how does it affect all people around the world? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a student of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, who loves humanity. But we also know technology. We know when you're trying to weaken something because you really don't want to be held accountable, America, for what you have done to us. So you said, So put it in the arena of everybody. Let it get lost in the sauce, like they've always done to us, Sister Rosalind.
Mm-hmm.
Civil rights. When we fought, look at the dog that was sucked on our grandparents and parents fighting the civil rights movement.
Right.
We don't benefit from the civil rights. The gays benefit. The women, and don't get your women. Don't get me wrong. We're not putting off on women like that. But my point is, they dilute it by making it okay. Everybody. See. So now the benefit that should have came to the ones who were victimized and fought to get the change made, then everybody jumps in the mix. And it's like, but damn, I'm the one that fought for it. Yeah, but I've got to get mine. Get out the way. This is what's going on. So I listen. So yes, they put this panel together, but it's still technology. It sounds good, but the UN has no teeth. They don't have the political will, and they know doggone well that if they have repertoires come to even look at it, they will put their reports together. It will go in the UN record. And every time somebody raises the point to hold the United States accountable, they're going to do what we call in Africa, kick the ball in the long grass. When you play soccer, you kick the ball in the long grass to stall for time.
Makes sense, yes.
That's what's going to happen with it. But you know what the benefit of it is, though? Even though the God of justice is going to be our come to our aid and give us justice, it's not going to come from the UN, the International Criminal Court, and some special tribunals. It ain't coming from them. But you know what the relevance of those bodies are? They're keeping the record. And the Bible, I know that the Holy Quran said that, and I heard Elijah Muhammad say it on a recording just recently, that the nations will be judged out of their own books. So Allah does not waste the work of any worker. No justice is not going to come from the UN. But if we can keep the record there, at least we have the record of what you have done. And we will use that. Our God will use that to make sure that he gets justice for his people.
Yes, sir. Now, Brother Brian, I thank you so much for your insight today. We always look forward to your commentary about what's going on in the global view. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for joining us today and tuning in to National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. Good night.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.